Freedom is the sense of being able to think, speak, or act in accordance with what one wants, without hindrance or restraint. Freedom is something that all people want, and to a degree, it's something that all people need. However, it's a guarantee in this life experience, because we live with other people, that all of us are going to experience a lack of freedom at some point in our lives. For some people, freedom is such an obsession that it ruins their life. To commit to something is to put all of your energy into something. To visualize commitment, you can think of standing at the end of a bowling alley and rolling the bowling ball down towards the pins at the end of that bowling alley. Obviously, if you have an aim, to achieve that aim, you have to commit. With no commitment, there is absolutely no success in any sector of your life. Doesn't matter whether it's personal, relationships, career, spirituality, anything. You have to put your energy into something in order to get anything out. But here's the thing. It's not possible to not commit. In fact, if you don't commit, you have committed to not committing. Let's look at responsibility. Responsibility is the opportunity to act independently because you are the one who has the duty to deal with something autonomously. This makes you the one who's accountable. Responsibility is also required to achieve an aim. Not taking responsibility is a lot like standing at the end of a bowling alley and just waiting there for somebody else to throw the ball for you, because you don't want to take the responsibility for whatever happens as a result of throwing that bowling ball down the alley. You don't want to be accountable for the result. This basically means you fail at every aspect of your life. You can't put yourself into spirituality, so awakening does not occur. You can't put yourself into career life, and so you don't achieve any major goals. You also will fail in relationships, because what happens if you don't take responsibility for that relationship is that you've put 100% of the responsibility of the relationship in the other person's court. It's up to them to solve the relationship, it's up to them to meet needs, it's up to them to repair ruptures in the relationship, and that's not going to last long term. That person's going to leave. But a great many people, especially the people that identify with the spiritual and or hippie movement, what they do is they don't take responsibility and they don't commit, and they confuse that with freedom. Both commitment and responsibility come with a certain kind of pressure. We could consider that pressure the price of free will and autonomy. That pressure is only worth it to people if they can see that they get something positive out of taking on that pressure. Some of the things a person could get as a result of taking on the pressure is authority, self-esteem, a sense of personal accomplishment, control, and rather ironically, freedom, for example. If we have an issue with commitment and responsibility, we have trauma related to both. The people who have the hardest time with responsibility and commitment come from households where they're perceived one or both parents of theirs to be dictators. Now, what sets a dictatorship apart is that power is maintained through force, and that force is carried out through consequences that a person can't afford. Some of these consequences might be facing total disapproval, ostracization, being scapegoated by the whole family, loss of belonging, shaming, isolation, emotional punishment, and even physical punishment. Because they can't face these consequences, they choose to comply. But because they don't want to have to choose to comply or not comply, it feels as if they're being forced into that choice. And so what these people do is they lose touch with the fact that they made the choice in the first place. Instead, they live their life feeling forced into everything. These people feel as if they have no freedom in the household, especially no freedom to be themselves. The freedom they had was the choice to give up their freedom and personal desires and authenticity to avoid the consequences set forth by this parent. A child growing up in this type of environment also didn't experience any rewards coming as a result of taking responsibility or of commitment. They experienced the exact opposite. For example, when they committed to a decision, they were made to feel like it was the wrong decision or like the price for mistakes is just too high to commit to a course of action. This is especially true if one of these consequences for making a mistake was blame and the loss of closeness/love of their parent. Responsibility came with consequences that were priced too high. To learn more about this, watch my video titled How to Get Over the Fear of Commitment. Freedom is all about personal desire. When we want something enough, we are willing to put ourselves completely into it and take the risks and the pressure involved with the responsibility and commitment therein. And here is where people who struggle with these two things got their wires crossed. If you are one of these people who confuses freedom with lack of commitment and lack of responsibility, here's how your wires got crossed. The belief that you were imprinted with in your early life is that you couldn't want what you want. It is wrong and comes with consequences that are too high to assume. You had to want what someone else wanted for you. You can't authentically make yourself do this, so you can't authentically commit to someone else's desire if it opposes your own. You also couldn't authentically take responsibility for carrying out their desire. You simply lived your life to appease them so you could stay safe and avoid the consequences of not doing so. But deep down this made you feel controlled and you resented it and you didn't feel free. You lost awareness that this is a choice you yourself made simply because it is never a choice you wanted to have to make. You felt forced into that choice. And because your association with commitment and responsibility is associated and linked with all these unpleasant experiences, including the giving up of your own personal desire, instead of seeing commitment and responsibility as freedom, which it is, you see it as the loss of freedom. If you are the person who had this experience, the duty inherent in responsibility feels like jail bars. If you are this type of person, the pressure of accountability feels like a ball and chain. If you are this kind of person, anytime you commit yourself to something and put all of your energy into it, it feels like a trap. Basically, you perceived duty, pressure, accountability, and committing to something so as to not be able to back out at it any second as a potential hindrance to your freedom. But because of this, you don't commit to anything, you don't take responsibility for anything, and you call it freedom. This isn't freedom. It's a perpetual state of lack of responsibility. This is not freedom. It's a perpetual state of lack of commitment. This is not freedom. This is perpetual avoidance. You have to understand that with freedom comes intense levels of commitment and intense responsibility. This is also true in our relationships. If you choose with your free will to take somebody else as part of yourself, which is what love really is, then it means you're taking their best interest as part of your best interests. Nobody's forcing you to do that. You're choosing it with your free will, but that comes with the responsibility of their best interests. This doesn't mean giving up your desires, and it doesn't mean requiring the other person to give up their desires. It's that you're both taking each other's best interests into account. Basically, they commit to finding a win-win scenario for both themselves and the other person because they've taken responsibility for their part in the relationships in their life. These people who assume the responsibility, the accountability within their relationships, not to be confused with lack of freedom. They commit to also finding people in their life to be close to who are intensely compatible so that this can actually occur. For more information about this, I want you to watch 2 of my videos. The first is how to create a safe relationship, and the second is take them as part of you, the golden key to a good relationship. If we do not uncross these wires so that we can associate freedom as innately involving commitment and responsibility, we will end up completely alone, having achieved absolutely nothing except for a life of avoidance. This is the difference between succeeding at never feeling tied down or caught, which is avoiding what we don't want, and really genuinely creating the life that we want, creating what we do want. And I must warn you here, so many spiritual and social ideologies were created specifically to justify a perpetual state of avoidance, because they were created by leaders and teachers who themselves were just as avoidant as the disciples that their teachings attract. This is your life. You came here to live it. You can think and say and do what you want and have a deep and happy relationship at the same time. You can be free, but freedom comes with great commitment and great responsibility. If you want a life that is truly free, your first commitment should be to improving your relationship to commitment and to responsibility. When you are living out your true desires with people whose desires are compatible to those desires, I can personally guarantee that the pressure and the risks inherent with responsibility and commitment will be worth it. Have a